The morning sun warmed the windows of Maplewood Diner, but it couldn't melt the cruelty inside. A disabled girl in a wheelchair quietly ate her breakfast when a group of arrogant boys began whispering, laughing, and mocking her like she didn't belong. Then one of them stood up and, with a cruel grin, slapped her plate onto the floor. The diner went silent. Clara's hands trembled as she stared at the mess on the floor, her cheeks burning with humiliation. The boys laughed louder, feeding off the helpless silence around them. One shoved her wheelchair back just to watch her flinch, and another mocked her voice when she tried to speak. People nearby looked away, pretending they didn't notice. The waitress froze, afraid to intervene. Clara swallowed her tears, forcing herself to breathe, because she had learned long ago that the world could be cruel to those who seemed weak. She bent forward awkwardly, trying to gather fallen food with shaking fingers, desperate not to make herself look even smaller. That's when an older man from the counter quietly stepped forward. His hands were worn, his face lined with years, but his eyes held kindness. Without saying much, he knelt beside her and helped pick up the plate. "You don't deserve this," he whispered, though his voice carried fear, as if even kindness was dangerous in a room full of bullies. Clara forced a small nod, but her heart ached, because she didn't just want sympathy, she wanted respect. The boys kept bragging, talking about how funny it was, how they could do whatever they wanted. Clara closed her eyes and prayed for the moment to pass, for the humiliation to end. But deep inside her, something stronger began to rise. Quiet resilience, like a storm building behind calm skies. Because Clara wasn't just a helpless girl, and the world was about to learn that. The minutes crawled by like heavy chains. Clara sat still, her fists clenched in her lap, trying not to let the boys see how badly they'd shaken her. Their laughter echoed around the diner like poison, and every time she heard it, the pain in her chest grew sharper. She glanced at the door, wishing she could disappear, wishing anyone, would stand up and stop them. But the diner remained frozen in fear. Even the manager stayed behind the counter, acting busy, refusing to meet her eyes. The boys noticed. Their confidence swelled. They leaned back like kings, proud of their cruelty, proud that no one dared challenge them. Then one of them smirked and said loudly, "Maybe she shouldn't even be allowed in here." Another added, "Yeah, she's just taking up space." The words hit harder than the slap. Clara's throat tightened, and for a second she thought she might break. But instead, she lifted her head, slowly, carefully, and looked at them. Her eyes weren't begging. They weren't even angry. They were calm, like she already knew something they didn't. The leader of the boys scoffed. "What, you gonna cry again?" he sneered, reaching out and flicking the edge of her wheelchair. Clara didn't respond. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. The boys burst into laughter again. "Ah, she's calling her mommy," one of them mocked. But Clara wasn't calling for pity. She wasn't calling for rescue. She was calling for a promise to be kept. Her fingers moved fast, her expression steady. Then she raised the phone to her ear and spoke softly, almost like she didn't want the boys to hear. "It happened again," she whispered. "Same place." She paused, listening, and her face hardened, not with fear, but with certainty. "No, I'm not hurt, but I'm done being silent." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. The boys leaned forward, curious now. "Who'd you call?" the leader teased, but his voice wasn't as confident as before. Clara looked at him, finally speaking clearly. "Someone who doesn't tolerate bullies," she said. And just as she said it, a low rumble began outside. Not thunder, not traffic, something deeper, something powerful. The windows of the diner trembled as the sound grew louder, closer, unstoppable. The boys stopped laughing. Everyone turned toward the glass, because whatever was coming was not ordinary. The rumble grew louder, rolling through the parking lot like an approaching storm. Forks froze midair. Conversations died instantly. Even the bullies went silent, their smug faces twisting into confusion. Clara remained still, her eyes focused on the glass windows, as if she'd been expecting this all along. Outside, motorcycles began pulling in one after another, shiny chrome catching the sunlight, engines roaring like a warning. The line of bikes stretched across the lot, filling every space, as if an entire army had arrived. Then the doors of the diner swung open. The small bell above it jingled softly, but the silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the room. A group of bikers stepped inside, boots hitting the floor with slow, controlled power. Their leather jackets carried patches and symbols, and their presence alone changed the atmosphere. They weren't shouting. They weren't violent. But their confidence was terrifying, like men who had lived through everything and feared nothing. The waitress backed away instinctively. The manager swallowed hard. The bullies shrank into their seats like mice who had just seen the shadow of a lion. At the front of the group was a tall man with a thick beard and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He scanned the diner slowly, his gaze landing on each face, until it stopped on Clara. And in that moment, something shifted. His expression softened, and he walked straight toward her without hesitation. Clara didn't look scared. She looked relieved. The biker crouched beside her wheelchair, his voice calm but firm. "Clara," he said, like he had known her forever. "I got your call." The bullies exchanged nervous looks. "Wait, you know her," one whispered. The biker stood up slowly, and the room seemed smaller under his shadow. He turned his head toward the booth of boys and stared at them like a judge about to deliver a sentence. The leader of the boys tried to laugh, but the sound died in his throat. We didn't do anything," he stammered. The biker didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply spoke with a quiet authority that made the air feel sharp. "You slapped her. You shoved her. You treated her like she wasn't human." He took one step closer. "And now you're going to fix what you broke." The boys' faces drained of color. Their hands shook. For the first time that day, they looked the way Clara had looked earlier, small and powerless. And Clara just watched them, because the karma they had earned had finally arrived. The biker leader didn't touch them. He didn't need to. His presence was enough to make their bravado crumble like dry paper. He gestured toward Clara's wheelchair with a slow tilt of his head, and the boys understood immediately. This wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't some harmless teasing. This was accountability. "Stand up," he said. The leader of the boys rose first, his knees trembling. His friends followed, glancing at each other like they were searching for an escape. But there was none. The other bikers stood near the entrance, not blocking the door aggressively, but making it clear that no one was running away without facing what they'd done. The biker pointed down at the floor where Clara's pancakes had fallen earlier. "Clean it," he ordered. The boys hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then the leader dropped to his knees, grabbing napkins from the counter, wiping the syrup and crumbs with shaking hands. His friends scrambled to help, their faces red with shame. The diner watched in stunned silence. People who'd been too afraid to speak earlier now sat with wide eyes, realizing something powerful was happening. Not violence, not revenge, but justice. When the floor was spotless, the biker looked at them again. "Now apologize," he said. The boy swallowed hard. He turned to Clara, unable to meet her eyes. I'm sorry," he muttered. The biker's voice sharpened. "Not good enough." The boy took a shaky breath and looked up at her properly. "I'm sorry," he said again, louder now. "I'm sorry for humiliating you, for treating you like you were less than me. You didn't deserve that." Clara stared at him for a long moment. Her heart still ached, but she refused to let her pain control her. "No," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I didn't deserve it, and neither does anyone else." The diner went still again, because Clara wasn't just forgiving. She was teaching. Then the biker leader reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small black card. He placed it on the table in front of the boys. "Here's the number of a community center," he said. "You'll be volunteering there every weekend for the next 3 months. If you don't show up," his eyes narrowed, "I'll know." The boys nodded rapidly, terrified but also humbled. They weren't being punished with pain. They were being punished with responsibility. And then the biker turned back to Clara, his eyes soft again. "Are you okay?" he asked. Clara nodded slowly. "I am now," she whispered. But the biggest reveal still hadn't happened. The biker leader turned toward the counter and snapped his fingers once. Instantly, Two bikers stepped forward carrying a polished black helmet and a folded leather jacket with a golden emblem stitched inside the lining. He gently placed a jacket over Clara's shoulders like it was a crown. Then he looked at the entire diner and spoke loud enough for every trembling heart to hear. "Let me make something clear," he said. "This young lady isn't just someone you can humiliate and walk away from." He rested a hand on her wheelchair like a shield. "She's the reason half this town is still standing." The manager blinked in shock. The waitress covered her mouth. Even the bullies stared like their minds couldn't process what was happening. Clara slowly reached into her bag again and pulled out a small folder. Inside was a photo, Clara standing beside city officials, cutting the ribbon at a hospital opening. Another photo showed her on a custom bike, racing in a charity ride, smiling like a fearless queen. And then one final photo, her face on the front page of a business magazine, the headline reading, "The youngest billionaire philanthropist behind Maplewood's revival." The diner gasped. Clara wasn't just a disabled girl. She was Clara Vaughn, the billionaire founder of a huge tech and medical foundation. The same foundation that funded the town school renovations, paid the diner's rebuilding loan during the pandemic, and donated millions to disability support programs. And today, she had come to Maplewood Diner quietly, without security, without cameras, because she wanted to feel normal for one morning. The biker leader stepped closer to the bullies. "You mocked her wheelchair," he said, "but she built ramps into places you didn't even think deserved doors." He pointed toward Clara. "You called her weak, but she's stronger than anyone in this room." Then, as if the universe wanted the lesson to hit even harder, the diner door opened again. Two young police officers walked in. Teen boys in training uniforms, fresh badges clipped to their shirts. They froze when they saw the bikers, and then their faces turned pale when Clara lifted her hand. The biker leader spoke first. "You recognize her?" he asked. One officer swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. "You're the sponsor of our youth police scholarship." Clara nodded calmly. "And those boys," she said softly, pointing at the bullies, "were just approved for that same program last week." The bullies' eyes widened in terror. Clara rolled forward slowly, her voice steady but piercing. "I believe people can change," she said. "But positions of power are earned through character. If you can't show respect to the most vulnerable, you don't deserve a badge, a scholarship, or anyone's trust." The police officer stepped forward immediately. "Understood, ma'am," one said. "We'll file a report and remove their applications." The boys began to cry, not because they were scared of bikers, but because they finally understood the weight of what they had done. And for the first time, Clara didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a voice. The biker leader smiled proudly. "You okay now, family?" he asked. Clara's eyes filled with tears, this time not from humiliation, but from love. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. And as the bikers walked out with her, engines roaring like thunder of justice, the entire diner stood up, not out of fear, but out of respect, because they had just witnessed the truth. Never judge someone by their chair, their clothes, or their silence, because the person you step on today might be the one who decides your tomorrow.